Hello, welcome to this part two, if you like, of things I wish I knew before I started getting really frustrated about um, coding or programming the device, right? So um, so the last video we kind of left it with installing launcher and then understanding that we can load um, we can kind of have an SD card with lots of different firmware, and then this app here, this launcher app, allows us to browse the SD card, look at all the firmware that we've downloaded into a folder, and it doesn't matter what the name of the folder is, and then we can load those bits of software, right? So that's where we're at now. One of the things I got this for was to learn how to do coding and programming, and getting this into a state where you can use your device for testing out code that you've written. I found it absolutely frustrating to try, because all the videos that I'd seen people using and demonstrating UI flow and the Cardputer specifically, they were going so fast I couldn't actually understand what they were saying and what they were clicking on to get this thing to work. So I'm hoping in my slow fashion that I can go through this quite simply, right? Um, there seems to be, I mean, first of all, you open this up, you need to connect to your community account, okay? And this is one of the big things that I found really, really frustrating, was it didn't seem to be made obvious that you actually needed, and it's much easier if you connect your UI flow to your community account, right? So do that first. The other thing to understand that you need to do in order to, when you write, when you do this coding and you want to run it to see what it looks like on your Cardputer, right, on the screen, you need to bind your Cardputer to your community account. Okay, so that there's obviously a communications thing going on there that's vitally important to get it to run, right? To get it to run apps. So I found it really frustrating because I thought, oh well, all I needed to do was to go into here. I know that my COM port is 10, right? And I would click on there, and I thought, oh well, that's it then. you know I've written this little thing here. I mean, it's just a simple bit of code, and that you would run it, and of course what you would get is this. And I was going constantly round and round and round in circles trying to understand why on earth, I've got this connected, I've got the web terminal open, and I kept getting fail to run all the time, and of course it wouldn't work. So best thing to do is to disconnect it. Okay, now, again, I hadn't seen that somebody clicked on these little icons down the bottom left-hand corner, right? You've got one which is the web terminal and the other one which is the web burner. And it's the web burner that you need to run in order to, one, download whatever code it is that you've got in the UI flow here, but also this will prompt you to bind the device to your community account. Okay, so we've we've we're running Uniflow. We've connected Uniflow. I keep calling it Uniflow. It's UI flow to our community account, which we did in the previous video. If we click on the device Cardputer down here, obviously we've got all these sort of devices, right? So if I click on, well, it knows I'm using a Cardputer, right? The other thing that wasn't made obvious to me was that you needed to add your device to one of these here, right? And this is the binding that needs to be done so that your device appears here before you can start downloading it. right? So you select Cardputer and you just confirm that yes, you've got a Cardputer. The mode that we're in is also quite crucial. Well, not crucial. I've plugged in the USB cable, but you can actually program this without the USB cable and it will do it over the cloud, it's calling it, right? Because it uses your Wi-Fi. That will become obvious when we go on. So at the moment, if I try running this code, it comes up with this again, and I was going round and round and round in circles, and I saw all this come up on the screen. I thought, oh, maybe that's now, doing something. You now go to click to run, and it still didn't work, right? So again, it wasn't really made obviously clear that you needed to bind your device to your community account. So we're now going to select web burner, right? And we get all this come up, right? Which I think is actually rather confusing, but anyway. So one of the things you have to do is slide the switch to off, then press and hold the go button, and then power on the device, right? So what was I doing when I saw that? It's it's really confusing. It seems so obvious once you figured it out, but I think as a new person coming into this brand new device, it was very confusing. So of course, with this device switched off, right, the go button is here, right, and then it says switch it on. Well, I was going, well, okay, my fingers are really small. What I'll do is I'll press that button and then switch it on there, right? And look at what happens. Nothing. It doesn't say that that's what it's supposed to be doing. So I spent ages trying to think, well, is there something supposed to come up on the screen, right? What they mean is that when you're using your USB cable, you press the go button in. So you switch the device off, you press the go button in, and you plug this in. Is the same thing to them as switching the device on. You still get nothing, but you may or may not hear the device connect to your computer, right? So that's when it's allocated a COM port. So we're now in download mode, right? Download mode. We've done this. We're now going to confirm. Right. Again, it doesn't really tell you what you're supposed to do here. So I faffed around here and then thought, well, okay, I've obviously got to connect to this now, right? So I click on this kind of little connect icon, and now it's come up with a slightly different description, but still on COM10. Okay, so now I click connect, and we start getting some things coming up. And I thought, hey, we now seem to be communicating. So the flow that I've been following is a click on erase, which obviously erases the firmware that's in the memory on the device, right? It's not going to erase your SD card. So we click on confirm. Right. So that's now erased everything off of the Cardputer, right? We now need to burn. Now, it's at this point that it asks you this, right? You need to bind your account before using the device. Are you sure you want to bind, right? Now, you'll see what this does. So I go, yes, right? It's got the MAC address. We can give it a name if we want to. And now this bit I don't really quite understand, but I've seen most people just put it on public. And I think what it means by public is that you can also program this and download code onto it via your Wi-Fi, as you'll see what happens in a minute. So this binds the device. bind device successfully. It now is going to download some firmware, which, by the way, seems to be this. It's UI Flow 2 Cardputer Advanced, because it's the same version. 243. It's also 243, and you get some options for other versions. Now, I've seen on some forums where people have had problems with 243. I don't know quite why, but they seem to have to go back to 242 for some reason, but I've never had a problem with 243. So we click on confirm. Now, this is the bit why I think you need to select public, right? Because this is the bit that allows you to configure the device to connect to your Wi-Fi. Right, so I don't change anything here. I've already got my settings saved. Right, so you need to know what your Wi-Fi SSID is and also your Wi-Fi password. You can just type them in there and then you can click burn. So you can see in the background there that, you know, the progress work going across. It's obviously writing the firmware to the little Cardputer. And I'm doing this in real time so that you get an idea. And I hate it when people speed up videos. So they start speeding up sections of their video and you don't actually really understand what's going on. I just find it really frustrating. As an instructional video, you actually, unless something's going to take 10 minutes, which this isn't, it only took 44 seconds, nearly 45 seconds. So it said burn successful, right? And then that's it. That's really all you need to do. Now, the configure bit, the button just is this information here, which we don't need to change because we've already done it. We can now close this down, or actually rather disconnect and then close it down. Okay. At this point, I will disconnect because you kind of need the firmware to load, right? So you disconnect this or switch the device off. I now seem to have two options. I now can keep connecting the USB, or I can just turn the device on and it will connect to my Wi-Fi, at which point the options down the bottom here will change. Okay, so we can do it both ways. I'm going to continue with USB. I find USB a lot more reliable. So we power it on, and now we get this kind of grey screen come up. And the first time I did this, I thought, well, I didn't really quite understand what this is. But of course, it's running the firmware for UI Flow, this, ready for you to use it for programming. So we are connected. We now can select our device down the bottom. And we can now click on our public device here and click confirm, because we're now communicating directly. This wasn't here before, but because we bound the device to our account, it's got a little green light on there. We can now confirm. So it's now communicating directly with, and we see it change, you see. We've got the name here of the device, and it's now talking over, well, we can now switch between cloud or USB, because of course the device has got our Wi-Fi SSID and password in it. Okay, so it's up to you which one you want to choose. I mean, I tend to just use USB because it'll be faster. So I've just written, I've just put this very, very simple block program in. We can now click on run, or we can do it this way. So we can either go now into the web terminal. Now we can see that the COM port has not only changed, but again, there was no documentation about this. So we're now looking at this as a board CDC, which I found out stands for communication device something or other. I can't remember now what it meant. But anyway, so we're going to talk on COM11 now. Right? So we're now connect to the device. Oh, look, we are now connected because it's our web app here is now communicating directly to the Cardputer, right? So I've got this program running in the background here, got this app here. If I now click on run, you'll see what happens on the screen. I run it, it's now downloading the app, and all it does is it changes colors of the screen, right? That's it, basically. Very, very simple. But we are now communicating directly. So now this gives you the opportunity to code, program, and play around with all of these options here and run it directly onto your Cardputer, which is really, really good. So I can now do a software reset from here, and it switches that off. It recycles it and switches it back on again. I can actually switch the device off completely. I can also download onto it as well, or I can download the program. There seems to be two options here. I can either do it from the interface, or I tend to actually use it from here because then I know it's actually really, really working. So that's basically it. Now, the interesting thing is what happens when you want to go back to resetting this device. Now, this made me think, because now this is just running the UI Flow firmware on this device. If we unplug it, and yeah, it's obviously switched off. So if I now switch this on, it just does that. And I thought, oh my God, how do I get back to my nice little launcher app so that I can run my firmware apps on the SD card? Okay, so basically what we need to do now is go back. Well, we can either come back to the burner here, or we can go back to this and go through that whole process again. So we connect our USB cable. We're now going to set this back to using the launcher. So we just obviously we've rebooted the device. We click on connect, and we're now back on there again. I got yeah, there we go. So we're going to install Cardputer. We're going to erase the device, and then we're going to go next and then install. Now I think this is going to fail because we need to go into download mode. I think we've got the wrong COM port setting. But anyway, this is the frustration that I had, because it said preparing installation, and I know it's going to fail because it should have started doing it by now. But of course, we're seeing this screen here. We're seeing this kind of grey screen. This is waiting for us to communicate with the web coding, right? That's not going to work. So if we unplug, right, this is going to fail. That's absolutely fine. Right, so let's start this from scratch. We're going to turn the device off. We're going to hold the go button in, and we're going to then switch it on to switch the device into download mode. Right, we hear it go plinky plink, but then nothing comes on the screen, right? This threw me quite a lot on how to do this. Now we can click on connect. Now we've gone back to our COM10 again. which is the USB JTAG, right? We're going to select that. We're going to click on connect. It's now talking directly to the device properly because it's in download mode. We're going to install Cardputer and we're going to erase the device. Yes, we're going to confirm the installation and now it will work. And here we go in real time. This was so confusing when I first got this device. I thought I'd bricked it, to be honest with you, because I couldn't really figure out what you were supposed to do. But of course, now we want to erase and install the launcher again. We need to put it into download mode, right, which is the go button and plug in the USB. Installation is now complete. Okay, so we don't need this bit anymore. If we now unplug the Cardputer, right, which I found out is the same way as them saying switch it on and off. Or, you use the button. So we now power this up. We get the launcher. And there we go. We're back to square one again. Right? We're absolutely back to square one with the launcher, which allows us then to go through, browse our SD card, which by the way hasn't been erased, and load whatever apps we want. Okay, now if we want to go absolutely back to factory default, right, I found the best way. Switch this off, press the go button, go back into download mode. Right, you won't necessarily hear anything, but we're now, if we go back to the M5 burner, the app that you're going to run on your local machine and not from a shared drive, we now want this demo, Cardputer ADV user demo, right? It's this version. I've already downloaded it, so it says either remove or burn, but you will have a button to download first, and then you'll see it do this. So now we're going to burn. We know it's on COM10. We're going to start, and it's now going to burn that firmware back onto the ADV Cardputer again. And again, I'm going to do this in real time so that you can see it doesn't take an awful lot of time. I don't know why people speed up their videos so fast. Okay, it's pretty much done. Yep, and there we go. Burn successful. Click here to return. Right. So if we disconnect the power and now switch the device on again, hey presto, we're now back to factory default, completely reset. And we can go back now to how it was right in the very beginning. I hope you found this useful. I hope that it helps some people. I've gone through it slowly so that people can actually really follow along and understand the steps along the way. So I'm really looking forward now that I understand how this all works and how I can kind of go full circle and enjoy your Cardputer ADV.